Welcome to Reporter's Notebook, where we talk to the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the stories breaking on their beats. I'm Jim Antle. I'm joined by defense reporter Mike Brest. Mike, we've hit the 6-month mark with the Russian invasion of Ukraine. What is the status of things at this point in the war?
So you're right that we just eclipsed the 6-month mark, a very symbolic day, one that also fell on Ukraine Independence Day, coincidentally.
Right.
So it was a very emotional day. And even leading up to it, we heard from both Ukrainian and U.S. officials warning that there was the possibility, or there was intelligence showing the possibility of increased attacks against civilians or civilian infrastructure in Ukraine. And that did come to fruition to some extent. With an attack on a train station in a small, about 90 miles outside the capital.
Right.
And there were roughly 25 civilians who were killed, which was, a big strike. But it also once again confirmed the intelligence from the U.S. and Ukrainian governments that were coming out. And in addition, the president acknowledged and then passed a $6 billion military aid package on the 6-month mark. And so this package, really, the way the administration framed it is they took it not quite in the same direction as a lot of their packages, and they decided in the way that this one was structured to look more long-term.
Right.
And so there were facets of this $3 billion package, much larger than the normal ones that they've come out with, thinking long-term as it relates to training, and sustainment issues and long-term logistics.
Because we've done a number of the drawdown packages, which essentially takes from what our resources are.
Absolutely.
In addition to there's been aid packages passed by Congress giving money to the Ukrainian government to help them in their efforts to defend their territory against Russian invasion. But President Biden marked this 6-month occasion with the latest aid package, and he reaffirmed U.S. support for Ukraine. Absolutely.
The other thing that came out of this latest aid package is whether it was President Biden, officials at the Pentagon, or the State Department, they all were very clear that this was just the latest aid package, not the last aid package.
Right.
They said as much in briefings on the current aid package that there will be many more to come, as many as they need. So it really is, just an indication that nothing has changed in the U.S. calculation here.
So the United States has also been involved in hostilities in Syria. There's been some renewed fighting over there, and Americans have gotten involved. Talk a little bit about what's happened.
So both sides, between Iranian-backed militants and U.S. soldiers in Syria, have exchanged fire over the last couple of days. A handful of U.S. soldiers have been hurt. None have been killed.
Right.
And in response and retaliation, the U.S. has conducted a handful of strikes that have killed a handful of militants conducting these attacks against U.S. soldiers.
So, we've had a sort of a presence over there. Not really anything comparable to Iraq or Afghanistan, but we've been involved really since the Obama administration in sort of trying to contain various terrorist threats over there, while at the same time Syria is in the midst of some degree of civil war.
Absolutely, and this is all going on specifically as it relates to the Iranian support part, as the U.S. and the Biden administration tries to re-enter the Iranian nuclear deal. And so the administration has been open and acknowledging that there have been, minor steps towards a re-entry, but, they are still very minor and incremental, and they have a long way to go before they actually get there. We heard earlier this week that they've taken steps in the right direction to the extent that they hadn't previously.
Right, some Iranian concessions that have apparently been made about some international inspections being allowed to happen and some investigation. Iran's not really affirming those reports necessarily, but that appears to be the position of the U.S. government. In addition to the 6-month mark in the Russian-Ukrainian war, we're also at the anniversary of the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan, and that was a 20-year war that followed the 9/11 terrorist attacks in the United States. But we've been focusing here on some of the issues that came up as the United States was pulling out of Afghanistan. And one of the tragic instances that occurred was an errant strike that killed an aid worker, and we've really there's been a lot of questions about whether the family would come over here, whether they'd support some kind of relocation. You've looked into this. Where do things stand right now?
So it's important to remember that the target of the strike, Mr. Ahmadi, was an aid worker. Mm-hmm. The U.S. military believed at the time that he had terrorist ties and posed an imminent threat to the U.S. military presence at the Kabul airport, and he didn't.
Right.
He was killed along with 9 others, 7 of whom were children.
Right.
The U.S. at the time, once it became clear and they acknowledged that they targeted the wrong person, mm-hmm. said that they would help get their family out of Afghanistan, and they would also pay them or compensate them for, lives lost. Mm-hmm. To this point, we've now heard from the ACLU, which is representing this family, mm-hmm. That there are 144 people that are essentially on this list to get out. Right. As a result of these promises, whether that's his family, relatives, as well as members of the organization that he worked for who are now also being targeted, mm-hmm. All because the U.S. publicly said that they would be compensating this family.
Right.
The compensation aspect has painted a target on their back, right. Given the Taliban is now in control in Afghanistan. Right. Mm-hmm. To this point, we know from the ACLU side that only 11 of the 144 people have actually reached the United States. Mm-hmm. Now, there are roughly 100 of them that have moved into these third countries, these additional countries in nearby Afghanistan, and they're awaiting, the immigration process until they can get to the United States. But there are around 30 to 35 of them that remain in Afghanistan, and it's really unclear exactly how they'll get out, mm-hmm. Given that they're still there because of, long immigration issues, mm-hmm. documents issues.
So is it mostly sort of a bureaucratic holdup, or is it a result of some kind of vetting, or is it a logistical challenge? What's holding this up?
It seems like it's a little bit to do with all of that, but it really mm-hmm. stems from the fact that the U.S. doesn't have a presence on the ground there to really be dealing with this, firsthand there.
Right. So the U.S. government, as a result of this and some other strikes that have happened where there have been civilian casualties, has tried to develop some processes to address this situation, make things like this less likely to happen in the future. But obviously, there are some challenges involved having left Afghanistan with the lack of boots on the ground, as it were, to really verify and make actionable some of this intelligence.
That's exactly right. And so we've seen both Secretary Austin in the years since this strike happened put a significant emphasis on creating a new framework or new protocols, put new protocols in place to make sure that these types of strikes don't happen. Now, a lot of the things that he has directed or urged haven't necessarily been implemented yet, but we've already seen a handful of strikes the U.S. have conducted over the last year where they have either relied on boots on the ground, as in the case with strikes in Syria, right. Or in the case of earlier this month in the strike in Afghanistan and Kabul.
Thank you, Mike. You can read Mike and the rest of our national security team's coverage at washingtonexaminer.com.